Hello, I'm Jim Burch. I'm president of the National Policing Institute, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this month's InFocus conversation. This month, we're taking a break from our typical approach of diving in deep on a specific subject matter within policing, and instead, we're talking about a topic and an issue and a day that is very, very important, in fact, sacred to the profession of policing. We're going to be talking about National Police Week and what it means to police officers, what it means to the profession of policing, and what it means and should mean to communities. I'm joined today by my good friend Bill Alexander, a former police officer from Prince George's County, Maryland, who served with honor and distinction. And Bill, it's great to have you with us now as Executive Director of and CEO of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial and Museum. So Bill, thanks for being with us today.
Jim, thank you. Thank you for having me and to some degree helping to leverage and expand our brand and help educate your audience about all things Police Week and certainly the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial and Museum. So thank you.
We're glad to do it. And Bill, you and I have known each other for many, many years. And I think you and I come across people all the time that know a lot about the memorial and the museum. Some people who've spent their entire careers working in that particular line of the profession, if you will. But there are still a lot of people out there that I run across occasionally who really don't know a lot about what is at the memorial, and certainly not what's in the museum, a much more recent addition. But I thought what we'd begin with, if you don't mind, Bill, is just talk a little bit about, when we talk about the memorial itself, we talk about it being a sacred place for policing. From your perspective, having served in law enforcement, what does that mean to you and what should it mean to other people?
Well, there's just no question in my mind that the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial, it really is a sacred place for the men and women who have served and are serving, and not just for the men and women in the profession, but also by extension, the surviving family members and friends of the men and women who have died in the line of duty and whose names now adorn what we view as very sacred walls. Of course, you mentioned I served with the Prince George's County Police Department during the 25 years I served. We lost 16 of my peers, more than a dozen of whom I knew personally to varying degrees. And for people outside of the profession, I think it's really difficult to put into words the kinds of bonds, the kinds of relationships that are formed within this profession. The men and women who are your coworkers are something more, much, much more than coworkers. I think I might be able to argue pretty strongly that the men and women you serve with become almost, and in many cases, even closer than members of your own family. They learn everything about you. They know everything about you. They know your most intimate secrets. And importantly, the men and women who you work beside, you know that they would be willing to give their life to help save yours, and by extension, you would be willing to do the same for them. And that creates a bond that is very, 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 again, hard to describe, and really resonates with police officers really down to their bones. And so I would argue that to lose a single police officer in the line of duty has an impact and has reverberations across the profession that are very unique to our profession. Every single police officer I know knows someone personally whose name is now on our very sacred walls. And if someone out there, say in the Midwest, isn't necessarily aware of someone directly, they almost certainly know someone who knows someone else whose name is directly on our walls. I've used the phrase before, this is not 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon away from knowing someone who has died in the line of duty. There are so few police officers compared to the overall population in the United States of America that even one single death, of course, I would argue, really does have an impact that is very, very hard to relay to people outside of the profession. And that is one part of the reason why this memorial is so sacred to the men and women in law enforcement, because it really does link all of us together in a way, allows us to see and remember and memorialize and honor our peers, our friends, our coworkers, to help remember who they are, how and why they died, and to help tell their stories for all time.
Yeah. No, I think you said it very well, Bill. And most people won't have any way of knowing this, but my father also served in that same department that you served in. And one of my childhood memories is seeing him react to the death of 2 police officers in the booking room at Prince George's County, a relatively famous case from the 1970s. And seeing how that impacted him, it was probably a unique experience for me to watch how that influenced him personally and professionally for the remainder of his career. It was very traumatic. So no doubt impact is the right word. And that impact reaches far, right, to coworkers, as you said, and also into families, as I witnessed. So why do you think the law enforcement memorial is maybe different in some ways from other memorials? You know, there's plenty of them in Washington, D.C., but why should people go to see this one in particular?
Well, perhaps one of the biggest reasons is that our memorial is one of the few, if not the only, in Washington, D.C. that is what they refer to as a living memorial, indicating that the deaths have not stopped. Every single year we continue to add historically hundreds of names representing the men and women who have served and died most recently. This year for 2024, we added the names of 282 heroes who died in 2023 and the years prior. And of course, you and I are very tragically looking at the future and knowing for certain that next year we will add at least another 150 names. So for one reason, that is one of the reasons why this memorial is so unique and so sacred. Another reason is that the memorial itself serves as a focal point for so much of Police Week each year, whether it's men and women, survivors, co-workers coming to the wall to see perhaps for the first time the name of their loved one etched on that very sacred stone. It's where Police Unity Tour rides in every single year. There are a variety of memorial services held at the memorial. The Canine Memorial, the Emerald Societies come out with the pipes and drums. Every single year following the FOP memorial service, they bring the wreaths from that ceremony to the memorial, and then we have honor guard teams stand watch over those wreaths until midnight on the night of the 15th. So much of the memorial has become, I think rightly, the focal point for so many activities in Police Week that it's more than just a memorial. It is also the centerpiece of all things Police Week, recognizing and honoring not just the men and women who have died, although certainly they are deserving of recognition, but also, I think, an opportunity for the country and the profession to recognize that law enforcement, the profession of law enforcement, has been and continues to be something good for our country, something good for the communities in which law enforcement serves. And so it really is a dual purpose memorial, not just memorializing the men and women who have died, but also to some degree bestowing, I think correctly, some recognition on the profession which you and I hold so dear.
Mm-hmm. How many names are on the wall now, Bill?
Right now there are just over 24,000 names on the wall. It's actually a really interesting time for us here at the memorial. As you know, the memorial was dedicated in 1991. At the time, they had added just over 12,000 names, which they thought at the time encompassed most, if not all, of the historical deaths which have occurred across the broad stretch of U.S. history. And also at the time, in 1991, they thought that there was going to be enough space on the memorial walls to last 100 years. And of course, as I know you know, we have dramatically blown through those original expectations. Here we are in the year 2024, and this year we had names engraved on what is the final line of names on what is the original memorial walls. Of course, our predecessors, both the prior CEO and the board, recognized that we were running out of space on the original memorial walls, and we added an expansion to the memorial, which was completed in 2021, which now gives us space for about another 12,000 names. Of course, you and I sitting here now, knowing that we blew through 12,000 plus names in 30 years, I'm not sure where that leaves us. We certainly will not reach 2,100, which was the original expectation when the walls were first built. So I think sitting here now, we might have enough space through about 2055, but what we do then, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Speaking of numbers, Bill, I've been to the memorial during National Police Week and seen the incredible crowds there. How many do you see each year during National Police Week at the museum, or memorial, excuse me?
Yeah, National Police Week, of course, that is the major, it's the Super Bowl event for law enforcement each year, and so many come to Washington, D.C. to help celebrate, remember, honor those who have died in the line of duty, and again, to help celebrate those in our profession. We find that every single year we outpace the predictions from the year before. Last year, we had something approaching 40,000 people come to Washington, D.C. and visit the memorial and museum, and really, most notably, attend the Candlelight Vigil, which I know you know is sort of the tentpole public-facing event for all of Police Week, held on the National Mall each year on May 13th. This year, again, I'm expecting something approaching, if not surpassing, 40,000 people. Of course, that includes survivors, the men and women who have lost a loved one directly in their family, their co-workers, their friends, their peers. People in the law enforcement profession writ large come out in large numbers. Citizens from across the country also come to help support law enforcement, and I encourage anyone who's listening to this, if you have any inkling, if you have any ability to come to Washington, D.C., even once in your life, and you have not been to a Police Week event, I strongly, strongly encourage you to come be a part of something that is very hard to put into the words. You can just feel the emotion coursing through the air, and what is a very unique experience. And notably, every single year, it's not just people from the United States who come to Police Week. Every single year, hundreds, if not thousands of people from around the world come to help celebrate, honor, and remember men and women in law enforcement. Because, as I said many times before, it's not just the citizens of the United States of America who recognize that law enforcement has been and continues to be a force for good. It's members of the world who come to help celebrate the profession, even if they aren't coming to necessarily celebrate or remember a specific officer that may or may not have served in their community. So many from around the world recognize police as a good thing, and they might not have something local in their home country to help celebrate, and they come here, they travel here to help celebrate and be here with all of us as we honor the profession.
Yeah. When we talk about honoring the profession, the first thing that comes to mind for me is, the importance of honoring the fallen. But a part of your mission too is to honor those who continue to serve, right? Not only at the memorial, but in the museum as well. So the National Law Enforcement Officers Museum is nearby the memorial. Bill, if you could tell us a little bit about that and how those two things go together, the memorial and the museum. They make a complete picture, and I'll let you tell that story.
Sure. Well, the memorial is in the heart of Washington, D.C. It's right in Judiciary Square, and just adjacent to, just across the street from the memorial, is our world-class museum. Of course, I might be biased, but I know you've been there too. It really is quite an amazing place and space. It's where visitors can come and sort of metaphorically walk in the shoes of a man or woman in uniform and really get a sense of how powerful even a single police officer can, and I argue is, serving the communities that they are serving. So the point of the museum is to help tell the story of American law enforcement and do that in a way that really does showcase how, where, why law enforcement has gotten it right, has done the right things for the right reasons, where men and women have very altruistically and in many cases made the ultimate sacrifice in pursuit of those very efforts of giving back to their communities, and not just their community but the country, in which I think both of us are very lucky and privileged to be a part of. So that is the role of the museum, to help tell the stories not only of the men and women who have died in the line of duty, but also tell the story of American law enforcement across the broad stretch of U.S. history for almost 250 years, to help tell the evolution of this profession, which has changed over time. And certainly police officers can and do make mistakes and thankfully very rarely commit criminal acts, but if you look at the entire picture of law enforcement, again, across those broad 250 years, there's just so much to tell, so much to learn, and I would argue very strongly, so many stories of which the public is oftentimes completely unaware, which really does showcase not just that men and women in uniform are doing the right things for the right reasons almost all of the time, but also how instrumental law enforcement has been and continues to be in preserving our democracy and keeping our community safe.
Yeah, well said, Bill. Well said. So I'd love to, a little trivia question for everybody. What's your favorite exhibit at the museum?
Well, I'm going to say something and everyone's going to go, oh, of course he would pick that. But one of the things that I like most in the museum is a statue of an officer and his canine dog. Ironically, or tragically, we just learned a couple weeks ago that the dog that the statue was based on passed away from natural causes. He certainly had a long career. But not necessarily because it's a statue of a dog, but because, you walk into the museum, there is a representation of law enforcement right there on the floor. Not in some big flashy exhibit, but there is a man in uniform kneeling down next to his companion, his partner, his canine dog. And to me, there's something that I walk in and I see that, and there's an instant connection where this is not speeding down the highway to catch a speeder. This is not having your gun drawn to intervene in a crime in progress. This, to me, represents the vast majority of the 800,000 plus men and women in uniform, standing ready to serve, not to be a part of a problem, not to cause conflict, but to be there ready to intervene if and when chaos interrupts the normal civilian life. That to me resonates with me. Of course, there are tons of exhibits in the museum. We have a use of force simulator that lots of people and certainly kids have fun in. We have a driving simulator, and lots of exhibits that really does showcase how much good men and women in uniform are doing, and also, to some degree, how dangerous the job can be in very tragic circumstances. There's a truck that is elevated right as you walk in the museum, even before you get down to the main floor, and it's peppered with shots where this officer was inside his truck getting fired on. It really does bring home how dangerous the job can be on those occasions.
Yeah. Well, I think my two favorite is the first telephone that the 911 call, the first 911 call was made on. That telephone is in the museum, right?
It is.
Then, for anyone who spent any time growing up or otherwise in the Washington, D.C. area, I think it was in the 1980s, the Air Florida Flight 90 crash, right, on the, was it the 14th Street Bridge that went into the river by?
It was. I want to say yes to the Ford. I should know this, of course, but yes, local to DC, the plane did crash, and there is that. Of course, that helicopter is hanging in the museum there, and we have quite a number of exhibits or videos, interviews of the people who were involved, who saved so many lives that day. It was an incredible story.
Yeah, it always strikes me when I see that helicopter, which I think is called Eagle One, right? Is it the Eagle One? At the time, is how small it is. Right, it's not a massive helicopter as some people might imagine, but it's just big enough for 2 or 3 people to be inside of.
Yeah,
that thing was hovering over the river in the snow storm, helping to try to save people's lives as they swam from the down plane. So it's quite a traumatic day in the Washington D.C. area, and glad that you were able to preserve that and other things there at the museum. Bill, is there anything that you would want to say in closing to those who are wondering, what Police Week is about, or whether they should take some time to come down to see the memorial or the museum?
Well, again, I want to thank you and National Policing Institute for helping to push this kind of message out to your broader audience, to remind people that there has been, of course, tragically a cost in terms of preserving and maintaining our democracy in our communities. There's a quote on the southwest corner of the memorial from then President Burch, who was here at the inauguration in 1991. He says, "Carved on these walls is the story of America, of a continuing quest to preserve both democracy and decency, and to protect a national treasure that we call the American dream." And that quote really does resonate with me. It does represent more than just the men and women who have died in the line of duty. It represents the profession writ large. And I just cannot encourage enough the men and women of our country, all of us as citizens of this great country, I might argue, have an obligation to help remember, to help tell the stories of, to never forget the men and women who have sacrificed everything for us. And we hope, I know you and I both hope, that Police Week each year serves as that sort of big neon flashing light in the sky. Hopefully it permeates people's social media feeds, and maybe to some lesser extent the popular media and news media, to remind each of us, all of us citizens of this great country, that we have an obligation to remember those men and women who have died in the line of duty and to honor them and their profession, all of whom are working to help keep us safe.
Well said, Bill, and I'm glad you reminded us about that inscription. The one that stands out in my mind is, I think, on another corner there at the museum, and that is, "In valor there is hope." Right, and it sums it up so well, and just something for people to see and to think about as they come down to the memorial during National Police Week. So, Bill, thank you for being with us, and thanks to everyone else for joining us for this edition of InFocus. Next month, we'll be back on our regular schedule, diving deep into a topic that matters to you, matters to us, and matters to policing and communities. So we hope to see you again next month. Thank you.